Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on BetOnline's $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the games are over, head to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to betonline.ag today to get in on the action. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is proud to partner with Illumination Brewing for another season of crafting State IPA, the perfect tailgate and game day beer for Penn State football fans. State IPA is available now at your local beer distributor, grocery store, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit illuminationbrewing.com/beer/state-IPA to learn more. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today, and keep an eye out for State of State apparel coming soon. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Penn State wins its opening game of the season on the road against West Virginia by a score of 34-12, despite roughly a 2.5-hour rain delay in the middle. Ultimately, Penn State is able to wrap things up in West Virginia against the Mountaineers in, ironically, almost an identical score to what we saw last year when West Virginia visited Penn State, but it just felt very, very different in a good way. We're going to get into all of that here in just a moment. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications as well. Comment on YouTube, get at us on social media at State of State Pod. And don't forget, our YouTube channel has memberships available. You can join right now if you go to the home channel page. You can also go to the description of this podcast and see the link to sign up. If you become a member of our YouTube channel, you'll get all upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free for just 99 cents a month. So thank you all so much. I hope you all enjoyed the game. We were dying for it. My voice is a little messed up. I was calling shows for TNA this past weekend. I'm still on location in Louisville, Kentucky before I fly out. So I've gotten to watch the game and really process this, but you were live. I guess we're still calling it tweeting, Justin. I don't even know what to call it on X at this point, but yeah, I love some of your tweets that you're saying, this is fun to watch. I think we got a number one guy. Play calling, spacing, ball distribution, explosive plays. I see you. You're a fun follow, ultimately, for these games along X. But just overall, the macro perspective, how did you feel about this performance from Penn State?
Well, it's funny, right? Because we get into, like, it's the game of football is beyond the numbers. Like, that's what you have to really realize, right? Because, like, when I'm looking at the numbers of everything that, like, last year, you remember Keandre Lambert-Smith had like 100-something yards. You know, there were some explosive plays, but the feeling after the game was like, oh, it was a puttery offense. They didn't know what they were doing. We questioned their identity, and that was like the feeling that you were like, okay, we're going to go into battle not knowing these things, and it left the fan base uneasy. To have the same numbers, but a completely different feel of the game. Even, I mean, I'm still looking at Drew's number. He went 11 for 17, 216 for 3 touchdowns. Like, if you would think that, I mean, like, okay, he had a great I think one of his best performances at Penn State from just an aesthetic view. And it's like, okay, he only threw the ball 17 times, very efficient, right? Not a volume passer, but he Andy kind of heard your comments about the running quarterback. And I think Coach Franklin called him Lamar Aller, right? Like, so he was out there moving, and he was being very
worried
efficient.
about this, but
True, but he was being very efficient on his runs. And like when he
He
did
was.
run the football, you know what I mean? When he did run the football 6 for 44 yards, like they were first down and efficient moving the sticks type of movements where it wasn't a necessary thing, and getting his running backs, both running backs into the game plan, like in a I won't say the predictive way, because like it was still a Penn State offense. Like it looked like Penn State, didn't look like anything different, but it was just like the play calling, the execution. I think it personified what Andy Koenig said earlier about his offense being a blizzard, right? And just getting to those different formations. And we talk about Mike Shanahan. We talked about it throughout the whole offseason about the most efficient, like the best offenses. Like I didn't like the creativity, because the creativity is more about the personality. And when I think of him having some stuff to him, it showed like just how he called the plays going into halftime, taking a shot. Like I remember there was just some things where it looked like Drew was like, okay, we're coming to, cut their throat. Like, all right, boom, we're throwing the ball down the field 1-on-1. Like, let's let it fly, right? And then you got the zone attempt with some zone runs. You got some power runs. I mean, the dichotomy of play calling. I mean, it was a fun game to watch. And then we can transition over to the defense. I mean, Lockdown U is alive and well. I mean, you could tell the swag, you could tell the speed in which they play with, the length, the athleticism. And just across the board, I mean, the defense plays up to par. So, like, I don't want to leave the defense out because, like, it's hard to maintain excellence. But when there's an expectation of what they're coming in at, that's what I'm going to kind of leave it at. So they were up to par. Shout out to Kobe King. He was running around thumping boys. You know what I mean? Again, the DBs. Who was it? Kimber. He got the sound bite of the year on the hot mics. What's up with the hot mics on CBS? That's another thing that was a nice little NIL situation. Yeah, I mean Fox. My bad, my Fox. But yeah,
You're good.
but no, it was a great game to watch. But just goes into, I guess, the rhythm and personality of a game, and like how that relates to the fans. Because when we're looking at numbers, that's what I hate. Comparisons about stats in football, because it doesn't always tell the story. And efficiency, explosive plays, everything that I kind of asked for, what I like to see. And it looked like it was under control. Like there weren't times where he was just thrown into a crowded area. Even when they ran the scissors route on his first route, and shout out to Trey Wallace. I think we got a number one receiver. That's who I was talking about. But Trey Wallace, and how he was making his plays, right? He makes the scissors route. He hits him in the hole behind the linebacker, takes off for yak yards. I mean, he's making the 1-on-1 catches. And it was like, okay, we need a play, go to him. So it was just a different feel, and like just the energy that they were playing with an away game. I mean, I think the guy from West Virginia spoke right. I think they came out with healthy respect, but they were like, yeah, we're doing what we need to do. So I loved it.
It's I want to stay with the offensive side of the ball, because I think the rain delay tells, it helps us tell two very different stories altogether, especially with Drew Aller. First half, 199 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, very efficient altogether. I believe 8 of 13 going into the half. And then I saw a lot of conversation on social media, and about the second half, it's like, man, Drew really didn't throw that much. Well, my brain went this way, and I'm curious what you think. I was like, well, it just rained for about 2.5 hours badly. So the field is going to be in rough shape, and you're still going to have that in the air. And everybody's now kind of cooled off, and then you have to warm back up, so to speak. So leaning on your running game to the tune of 173 yards on the ground in the second half is freaking outstanding. And it makes so much sense because, yes, while it was a 20-6 lead, which isn't a gigantic lead, but certainly big enough, Andy Kotelnicki being very adamant since day one, this is more about the running game than it is about the passing game in this offense. So to just say in the second half, we are going to be more physical than you, we are going to run the ball, we are going to control the clock, and still continue to score and have explosive plays on the ground, and then select plays here in the passing game here and there, I thought it was perfect. And I come back to the way Michigan beat Penn State last year in the second half. J.J. McCarthy, very different quarterback from Drew Aller, I will say that, didn't throw the ball at all in the second half. And everybody went on J.J. McCarthy and was like, oh, well, this guy can't throw the ball, all this sort of stuff. But it was also a flex by Michigan that it's like, we're just going to run the ball down your throat. Penn State did something similar to West Virginia here in the second half, and that was the most encouraging thing. And when you look at those stats, the virtual identical yardage total through the air and on the ground, that balance James Franklin's been talking about that his entire time at Penn State. And those are the times when a James Franklin Penn State offense is at its best, is when you see that balance altogether, not those bloated numbers in one way or the other, passing or running. Then something's wrong. And I think that's why last year, to your point about the West Virginia game for Drew Aller, for instance, over 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. A lot of people thought, oh man, we have our guy, but like we're still kind of waiting to see if it blows up, like it felt good, but not great, kind of like you were saying. Today, or yesterday rather, the way that he was able to be nimble on his feet, Lamar Aller, as you put it, I thought that was great. He clearly has changed his body. He is able to move a little bit better than he did last year. And not to say that he is a bad athlete or anything like that, but James Franklin's spoken so much about how the strength and conditioning program has been fantastic, how the training table in the facility has really changed things. And he's given a lot of love to Pat Kraft for that. It felt like Drew Aller was comfortable, confident, motivated. He was fired up. He would get ticked off about things, like all the things that we wanted to see from Drew. You saw that, and that freaking cannon for an arm. You talked about the scissors route that Trey Wallace ultimately scored the touchdown on. That ball was out the second that Trey's right foot was planted in the ground to make his cut. There's nothing you can do as a defensive back. The accuracy, the placement, the decision-making that we saw last year, protecting the football, being responsible with the offense, all those positives you saw last year got amplified and brought forward. Am I ready to crown the guy as the greatest quarterback that ever lived? No, it was a very good game, very good start to the season, but it just felt like this was the balance and the productivity and explosiveness that we needed to see from this Penn State offense. It's week 1. It's too early to get really excited about it, but I felt very good about Aller. Where do you see him and specifically this wide receiver core going this year? I think that's a very important question to ask out of this game.
I think another thing that you mentioned when we talk about the explosive plays and how they're playing, and we can talk and we'll get into that, but I think it's that identity, right? When you have like even a friend or something that you're into, like when there's that identity that you can trust. So in the first half, like it was clear, like our identity is going to be explosive plays. We're taking the one-on-one matchups, and that's what it is. And like you said, the second half, it was clear, like this is what we're trying to do. So I think some of the things that we were speaking on last year was, what are they trying to do? Like, okay, it's a play action pass here. It's a screen this way. It's this. It's like
and
all over.
How many games did we see last year where it was like 7, 8, 9, 10 receivers touch the ball? Almost not exactly the inverse. I think it was 5 receivers caught passes and about 5 people ran the ball. So it was more bounced in the direction of how many ball carriers can we get as opposed to receivers involved.
And I think there's another point to it. I think when you listen to coaches before the season starts, they give the true evaluations of what players are playing, like to the receivers. He spoke of Amari Evans and Trey Wallace being guys that stood out. 2 guys that are making splash plays in the game. Amari Evans and Trey Wallace. So guys, like practice, hey, you got to transition to practice to the field. But like at the end of the day, that's encouraging, right? Like those guys, I mean, from different ways, whether it's explosive plays, catching the intermediate routes, and just kind of showing up. Again, like we didn't throw the ball that much, like only 17 times. And like when we talk about the explosives, whether it's from a running play, Nick Singleton, like I don't think anything changed with his running style. I think there was a level of him interacting with defenders 6 and 7 yards down the field, and he saw what happens. Like, okay, he gets going. You can't really stop that type of acceleration and speed, but kudos to the offense, because like again, they were putting them in great spaces to do that. So with Drew Aller and the receivers, I mean, I think you feel encouraged about where the season can go and the different ways that you can skin that cat. Like we showed you, okay, like if you want to put an 8 in the box or do whatever you want to do, like come on, we're going to toss it out here. And if you don't, we're just going to run the ball down your throat, because that's essentially what happened, right? Came out, they're like, all right, I dare you to throw it. I dare you to throw it. It's like, all right, we're going to throw it. And then they were like, all right, let's back up a little bit. It's like, all right, you going to back up? Let's run it down your throat. Like that's the chess match of football, and checkmate.
Very good adjustments by Andy Kotelnicki altogether. I want to get to the running game some more, but staying with wide receiver, 9 targets altogether for Trey Wallace. Tyler Warren, 3 targets, 3 catches, 30 yards receiving, and a touchdown. So Wallace and Warren kind of leading the way. Amari Evans, you pointed it out, caught 2 passes for 55 yards, and then one catch apiece for Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Katron Allen had that touchdown catch as well, and Nick Singleton did not have a touchdown catch, excuse me. But Katron Allen had a touchdown catch. No targets for Liam Clifford or Julian Fleming. And I'm not putting that on the offense as a whole or Drew Aller necessarily, but no Clifford, no Aller. I'm sorry, no Clifford, no Fleming in week 1. Concerned or just kind of, you know what? It's a roll of the dice when these games happen.
Roll with the hot hand. No, I do not think so. I mean, I liked how that offense looked, and if they find a way into the rotation, I mean, go for it. I mean, there's different offenses, different things that come to the game. I think for that many explosive plays, the formulation of an identity and the rhythmic play, I believe, like, yeah, if they can find a way in, they can find a way in. But I mean, they're just added weapons at this point, right?
Added weapons, but did you see Clifford and Fleming necessarily getting open?
In the system, I mean, I think a lot of people can get open, right? I think somebody like to talk about the spacing that they were calling routes. If they can run the routes, I mean, they're from that standpoint, I think they can fulfill the roles of those different positions. But I don't know if they're difference makers, right? When we think about like when we talk about Trey Wallace and Amari Evans, and it's like, okay, we need a play. Who are we going to? Okay, boom, going here. Like, are they one of those guys? I don't know, but I mean, time will tell.
Flipping over to the tight ends briefly, Tyler Warren, obviously involved in the passing game. Khalil Dinkins was not able to play during this game, so you did see Andrew Rapplier and Luke Reynolds getting involved more as blockers and being involved in the passing game, but no targets, obviously. What did you think about the tight ends? Because it was limited, and I think there's still so much more potential specifically for Warren for what he can be in this offense.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the delay made it pretty tough, right? Because it's like you're sitting there for 2.5, 3 hours waiting. But so sometimes it seemed like he seemed like he was efficient in whatever he was asked to do. It just didn't seem like they threw the ball 17 times, right? Like it's still at the end of the day. I mean, he showed up when he showed up. I just think, it was one of those days where he was more so in the blocking and doing that type of deal from a tight end spot. But
the running game, how did you feel about the offensive line's performance? And also, why do you think Nick Singleton had more success on the ground today than Katron Allen? It wasn't for lack of trying for either guy.
No, I mean, it's the running to an extent of running styles, right? They were like kind of big lanes where they were running zone. He was pressing and he was, again, getting downhill extremely fast. And even from the standpoint of misdirection or like the screen that Katron scored on, it was still one of those things where he's bouncing off tackles, making people miss, and he finds the end zone. So I just think that when you have speed, right? We talk about speed brings opportunities. When you have speed, it brings opportunities for like extreme explosive plays. It makes the game different when someone's taking a 60-yard touchdown or a 50-yard run, and it's like, okay, that's curtains. So Nick Singleton has that ability. So there's just a little bit risk reward when you're giving him the ball, because if you give him 6 yards untouched, he can turn that into a 60-yard touchdown. And that's what we saw. But I don't think that's any different. That's just his special trait. And Nick Singleton, and Katron didn't really have any of those, I don't say opportunities, but the matchup, right? Styles make the fight. I think he didn't match up that well against West Virginia's defense and what he brings to the table.
It reminded me so much of the Nick Singleton we saw against Auburn 2 years ago. And I was like, yeah, that guy's back. That's awesome. And again, it's not that he left. It's just needed things to change a little bit, needed some offensive play calling to be more in his favor, his running style. And again, I don't look at this in terms of Katron Allen's stat line. I think it was 10 for 20 on the ground. I mentioned the touchdown catch, so he got involved. Katron is just that Mr. Dependable when you need him. And it just wasn't there in terms of his interior run style against West Virginia. So I'll give them credit. And then looking at the offensive line, the way that they performed in this game, the interior of the offensive line, I thought was very, very solid. The offensive tackles, it's hard to really extrapolate too much from this because I don't think there was a true alpha dominant threat pass rusher on this West Virginia defense. And between the running game utilizing Nick Singleton in the way that they did. And then also the ball was coming out quickly. If Drew Howard was dropping it back to pass, he certainly had time to throw. It didn't feel like, okay, like we know that this pass protection is going to be elite. It was tough to gauge it against West Virginia, so we're going to have to see how the season progresses. But felt like a good start for the O-line. What did you think?
I mean, I think it was a great start. I think they did what they needed to do in the passing game and did what they needed to do in the running game. Like, again, established a level of safety for Drew on the back end, whether he was running the football, whether he was passing the football, and we had to do like zone or power play situations. And so from that standpoint, there weren't any glaring holes. So when you have that, I think that's a solid stamp of week one, right? Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You're seeing live stunts for the first time. You're playing a different team. There can be mismatches. There can be a lot of different things. No free runners from what I can remember, again, in the game being a 3-hour break. Sometimes you forget which was it this year or last year? No, but but they rung the bell when they needed to in the pass game and in the run game. And again, no glaring holes. So from that standpoint, from offensive line, you gotta love that.
Lastly, for offense, the Bo Prabula package. We got
Sorry, but with young guys on the offensive line too, with that to happen with some young guys on the offensive line is also pretty encouraging.
True. And again, Nick Dawkins, as long as he's been at Penn State, this is his first year being the guy at center. So some growing pains. And again, it's week one. As I was mentioning, the Bo Prabula package got a little bit more run under Andy Kotelnicki. It's something we expected. Just not Bo Prabula's day. The fumble passing game wasn't exactly what he hoped it would be. So I think there's still a lot to be discovered with that quote unquote package. How did you feel about Bo's day? It was a little challenging.
Yeah, I mean, when you're coming, if you're a rotating quarterback with a 3-hour delay in the game, that's just a hard thing to do. But he still flashed, right, and then his skill set and his athletic ability to make plays with his arm and his legs. So with that standpoint, I think with that and the Kotelnicki's offense and some of the things that we were able to see Drew Aller do from a running standpoint, I think it breeds a level of creativity and problem solving for defensive coordinators moving forward. It's like, well, damn, they have this guy that can do this, but if he starts doing this, so then you get the aspect of defensive coordinators starting to chase ghosts a little bit. And that's kind of what he presented, I feel like, was like a little bit of this, a little bit of explosive plays, a little bit of screens, a little bit of misdirection, a little bit of normal base routes, getting to them in different ways, a little bit of power running. And so it really sets up, their offense to kind of grow off of that. We talk about building a pyramid or building something from a system standpoint. I think you can see like, okay, they're doing something for a reason. Like it seems like because they're having success for this, and then it's like, all right, we're going to change, and now we're going to attack it this way. And when you have that, I mean, I think the sky's the limit. You heard Pat McAfee. He saw it, and he was watching it in person. He's like, man, this looks kind of easy for these guys. Like they want to give it to you this way, they can give it to you that way, and that's when you're starting to deal with high-level football teams.
Yeah, shout out to my old coworker on that one. That was cute that classes got canceled on Friday. It was cute,
right?
So just a button on the Bo stuff. I think the great thing about Prabula, yes, it was a rough day. Penn State didn't show its cards completely for what they can do offensively. And
Exactly.
You use the quote from Andy Kotelnicki when he first came to Penn State is that his offense is like a Dairy Queen blizzard. It's vanilla. It's just got a little bit of candy mixed in, something like that. And it mixes everything up. There's a lot of motion, all those elements from the wide receivers to the diversity of the running game to what Bo can be contributing to this offense as a potential playmaker. You saw a very limited amount, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. It's freaking now September. It was August. You got Bowling Green this coming weekend. You got a bye week. Then you got Kent State. And then you get Illinois to begin Big Ten play officially. So it's okay to take your time and not show all your cards offensively at this point in the year.
We had the appetizer last week. Now it's time to feast. College football is back. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a full slate of games for week one, including the big matchup in Atlanta between the preseason number 1 and number 14. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride now all the way through the expanded playoffs. Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code COMBINE. That's code Combine for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball.
Let's flip over to the defense. This felt like a very good performance from this defense. Hats off to Tom Allen as the new defensive coordinator. Did not feel like this defense missed a beat from last season. You and I have talked about it a lot of departures to the National Football League, the likes of Chop Robinson, defensive backs Kalen King and Daquan Hardy, missing Johnny Dixon as well. So it was big questions specifically with the defensive backs. I felt very good about Lockdown U. You saw a variety of guys getting involved. You saw a lot of corners getting involved, leaning on the strength that is this safety room. KJ Winston and Jalen Reed playing very, very well. Shout out to Zakee Wheatley as well. It felt like Garrett Green, one, was under pressure and is an offense that it's an offense altogether where they want to get the ball out quickly with West Virginia. So it wasn't too many instances where he's holding the ball, and he's got to eat it, something like that, or throw into traffic, whatever. And you did see the late pick. But at the same time, this secondary took everything easy away. And you can sit there and maybe say, it's like, man, they gave up some really gashing passes, some explosive plays. A couple of them were tip drills. I understand that. But for the most part, West Virginia had to live and die on those in the passing game to get anything out of the passing game. What did you think about Lockdown U?
I mean, I was excited, right? I mean, from just the attitude in which they played, there was a nice swag that they moved around with. Obviously, it was just not a drop off for a bunch of, I won't say first time players, but like a new group that's out there competing together, and like they seem to be on the same page, right? Playing fast, playing confident. I mean, you can hear it from some of the sound bites of how they were approaching competition. And the only thing I would like to see is a little bit more, turnovers or possession creations. But from that standpoint, they weren't giving up anything, and they could see they were challenging all the routes. And I think, like you say, you had the transfer portal guys like Kimber and Harris, and KJ Winston has 12 tackles. Jalen Reed was doing his thing. Loved seeing. Not to get off of the DBs, but Tony Rojas flash, and just saw the speed, length, and athleticism showing up across the board, but especially in that secondary. And it's just seeing the rotation of guys in the secondary and not a drop off in sight that's strong. And we already knew that Penn State has a strong defense and what they can do on defense and how that stabilizes a program. When you add that with the offense, it makes it even more exciting, right? So, shout out to Coach Allen, shout out to all the defensive coaches, right? Because, you got a new person at the head, but you still have the same outcomes, right? And now we get some turnovers and we're really cooking.
2 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, the interception by Elliott Washington II, who's a guy no disrespect, we just haven't even really talked about considering the depth of this defensive back room.
Beautiful play. Yeah.
5 pass breakups and then 2 forced fumbles. So, the defense was everybody to the football in the instances where they needed to be there. I do want to get the linebackers and the way the defensive line played, but this secondary made it very difficult for West Virginia. And again, I think it's taking a very honest and realistic look at this, that yes, people were talking about Penn State could be on upset alert going into West Virginia, hostile territory, all those things. Garrett Green, I think a lot of that wide receiver room, not as much. There is not that alpha threat amongst the West Virginia wide receivers, so you just have to take that for what it was. They do have some talent in regard to their running backs. That offensive line, not the same as last year. I believe Zach Frazier was the center last year off to the National Football League. He was outstanding and anchored that offensive line. They weren't the same. But this secondary for Penn State, I think there's a lot of cause for excitement. I know that was a big question mark for a lot of other people that cover Penn State football, and we're biased on this podcast because Justin coined Lockdown U. We understand that, but defensive backs look pretty darn good in this game. Let's get to the linebackers, as you mentioned. Kobe King, excellent game. First game officially with the green dot, so I think that's something to consider altogether in this game. And then Tony Rojas, as you and I have talked about, like we saw the flashes last season. He clearly built his body the right way during the offseason. He is athletic. He is rangy. I could see him wearing the sticks sometime in the future. But what did you feel overall about the linebackers? Shout out to Dom DeLuca as well, who had himself a nice game.
No, Dom DeLuca, Tamir Robertson, like they're getting some action in there. Kobe King, like you like again, you like the athleticism and the ability to go sideline to sideline and also come downhill and thump and play big boy ball. I think that's what you were able to see, just bigger athletic guys. And even just the fit of Abdul Carter on the line, they double teamed him a lot, but it opened up just action for everybody else. And they were making the plays that they needed to make. Linebacker's not an easy position to play, especially with limited snaps. So with those guys starting to get like significant snaps, and we didn't have any moments in the game where you felt like, oh, that's a super leaky defense in the middle. Like, no, they were like clogging holes. They were coming with bad intentions, and that's what you would like to see from defensive linebackers or defensive linebacker from linebacker U at Penn State.
Altogether, Penn State allowed 15 for 29 through the air for 161 yards, a 52% completion percentage altogether for West Virginia quarterbacks, and one interception. And then on the ground, 37 carries for 85 yards, a touchdown, an average of 2.3 on the ground. That's the stat line every defensive coordinator and head coach wants to see from their defense.
I mean, 100%, right? Because like at that point, like, what are we doing? That just give you some. It's something to like lean on, especially moving forward. We have a defense like that. I think that opens up even the offensive play calling and how they're going about their games, because you can take a little more risks when you can have a defense that one can stop guys and create turnovers.
The defensive line, Zane Durant looked very, very good in this game. The interior of the defensive line, obviously holding up against the run for the good part of this game, looked very good in that department. And I mentioned it before, this is an offense in West Virginia that is designed to get the ball out quickly. So there are plenty of people I saw on social media saying, Abdul Carter didn't look like the menace that we thought he was going to be in camp. I still saw him flying around and being very active altogether in the way that we've gotten used to. But again, he's changing positions here altogether. What did you feel about the pass rush, not just from Carter, just overall? Any cause for concern, or was it more so like, hey, they did what they did against the opponent they had that week, and that's what they needed to do?
They did what they needed to do for that week. I mean, they stopped the run. That's the number one thing for a defensive line to do. So they were able to get to some pass rushers, and when they did, they had some blitzes lined up, and you know, he was taking on a lot of times two blockers, right? Like when they were double teaming, and the efficiency of the run game and being able to make some plays behind the line of scrimmage. I don't think there's anything to be concerned regarding the defensive line. So the lack of sacks, I mean, again, that's here or there, but I think I like the way that the defensive line looked when I watched the game.
I think we now have a very good, honest understanding of what West Virginia is. I think we talked about it. They had a very nice season altogether after playing Penn State in 2023 and finished, I believe, winning 4 of their last 5 games. So there was a lot of positivity, justifiably so, coming into this season. I think we can realistically say West Virginia is not the strongest opponent on Penn State's schedule, maybe not even the top 5 or top 6 opponents that Penn State is going to play this year. So it's extremely difficult to project out. It's week 1. A lot of penalties for Penn State. You know, James Franklin is going to want to get that cleaned up, and that's going to bother him immensely. Completely understand. As you saw the offense and defense play in this first game, how do you think that's going to project against the big boys, the real big-time competition Penn State has on their schedule this year?
I think from the fundamentals of football, what we've seen yesterday, I think is encouraging for the quote-unquote big boys of college football. And I think that is why we all have this feeling of enjoyment of what we watched, right? It's like, okay, we got explosive plays. We have players that can beat guys one-on-one. We got guys creating separation. We're having explosive plays on defense. We're stopping the run. We're getting off the field on 3rd down. We're, like all the things that make up a good team, regardless of that, like we're getting the outcomes with the right processes. right? And then also from a fan standpoint, aesthetically pleasing, like hard hits and explosive plays. Right? So when you
Yeah.
think of that, I think that is what builds up to the let's say like the championship or playoff level teams.
Lastly, to wrap things up here, special teams. Caden Saunders, some bumps and bruises during camp. He pretty much just did what he had to do in terms of returning. And then kicking. Any
Oof.
concerns?
Yeah, concerned about kicking.
Hmm.
Concerned about kicking, but I mean, yeah, kicking's an interesting thing. I don't want to say. So it's a mental game, right? And sometimes you got to get that thing squared away. I wonder if that has anything to do with their approach for going for two at certain points of the game, or how aggressive they need to be from certain parts of the field. But yeah, having a automatic kicker is a weapon, and having one where you have to is a question mark is a strong liability. So that has to get figured out.
The positive thing, as I mentioned, Penn State has some time here in the first few weeks of the season to dial in on all these little idiosyncrasies. You have Bowling Green this coming week on the 7th, then you have a bye week, and then you get Kent State on the 21st. Home games, so you're in State College for 3 weeks, then you get the Illinois game, then you get UCLA. So I mean, like, you're going to be home for a while to really work on these things, but you have a minute before the competition starts to ramp up. So this is the beauty of the way that the schedule is set up. Getting that bye week right in the middle of September, I think, especially reflecting on the physicality of training camp, the way James Franklin talked about. Yeah, we upped it for a reason, to try and get us ready for October, November, potentially December, potentially January. Very understandable. Having that is more valuable than ever, I think, in the middle of September for this team. Discarding the competition that you're going to see altogether, Bowling Green and Kent State, they are what they are, no disrespect. Getting that, I think, is really going to be a positive when we look back on this season for Penn State. So overall, nice way to start the season, go on the road into a hostile environment and get, as I mentioned it before, last year 38-15, this year 34-12. Part of you can look at it and say, it's like, neither team's really changed from last season, but it's also like the gap may not have widened, but Penn State certainly looked different than they did last year, and yet you still get a very similar result. It's fascinating.
Right. Talk about it a lot when you go through recruiting. It's not it's like the what and the how of the evaluation. You know what I mean? So all production isn't the same.
Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications, comment on YouTube. We know you guys have a lot of opinions on this. I'm very curious to hear how you guys feel about all the facets of this game, because there's a lot to dissect with a handful of easier opponents coming up. You can take this West Virginia game for what it is and see Penn State progress. Comment on YouTube, get at us on social media at State of State Pod, and check out the link in the description of this podcast and also on our main homepage on YouTube to join right next to the subscribe button. You can become a member of the State of State YouTube channel, and you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State ad-free for just 99 cents a month. So thank you very much for joining us. This Wednesday, we're going to have a full game preview of Penn State's first home game of the year, Penn State versus Bowling Green on Saturday, September 7th. Very nice way for Penn State to open up the season. However, number 8, Penn State, wins in Morgantown, West Virginia against the Mountaineers by a score of 34-12.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, let us know what you think of the show on social media, and check out all of our content on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Search for the handle at State of State Pod. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.